I've heard senior Tories say the best thing is that he smokes and drinks, so he's probably going to die before then. If that's the best they've got, our best chance of winning this election is if Farage has a hernia or something. But if that's your strategy, waiting for him to pop his clogs, seems to be a bit threadbare.
Okay, I never agree with the New European, which is, by the way, the most despicable lefty newspaper in the world, which is saying something. I never agree with them about anything. But maybe I'll make one exception today, because they've posted a death notice for the Conservative Party on their front page above the headline, "Yes, you can safely write off the Tory party now." And it reads, "Deaths. Conservative Party Tories died after a long battle with reality, aged 190. Will not be missed. Beloved child of Robert Peel and Margaret Thatcher, survived by Brexit and Nigel. Mindful of austerity, the family asked for no flowers but donations to the Tufton Street Hospice for the politically deluded. Usual brown envelope, please. All further enquiries to Rees-Mogg & Co. Traditional Victorian Funeral Directors." And look, it is true that senior Conservatives have admitted to close Reform ally Gwaine Towler, the poor bloke that was also sacked by Zia Youssef, even though he's brilliant. They've admitted to him that their only hope to win the next general election is the death of Nigel Farage.
I've heard senior Tories say the best thing is that he smokes and drinks, so he's probably going to die before then. If that's the best they've got, our best chance of winning this election is if Farage has a hernia or something. But if that's your strategy, waiting for him to pop his clogs, seems to be a bit threadbare.
And with punchy ads like this decrying the immigration invasion of the UK, the odds remain on for Farage storming Downing Street.
So we have to make the case for the benefits of migration, the benefits of free movement.
The whole United Kingdom is better because of immigration.
In particular, I'd like to thank the Home Secretary for removing the annual limits on work visas and also on international students, both of which I lobbied for.
The previous government, they wanted to deport us, but now they make the procedure easier for us.
So you like the Labour government?
Yes.
Powerful, right? But is it really as simple a choice of Reform UK or nothing? I'd argue that the growing concern from Faragists over the now cleared and unleashed and unshackled Rupert Lowe suggests not. For example, Rupert challenged Farage fanboy Matt Goodwin directly for the first time today on X, writing, "What's your view on 4 armed police officers arriving at my home unannounced late on a Friday night to confiscate my guns as a result of a false allegation from the Reform chairman? The absurd reality of modern Britain indeed." Goodwin replied, "To be frank, I wish you could all find a way of getting along because I'm more interested in trying to save the country." To which Rupert retorted, "Take that message to the people who made the false allegation to the police and who tried to put me in prison." There was a similar story with Reform's West of England mayoral candidate Aaron Banks, who wrote to Rupert, "Everyone is bored of the argument. You need to know when to move on. I'm sad you've gone down a political rabbit hole. Take a rest from it." For Rupert to reply, "The Reform leadership tried to put me in prison on false allegations, Aaron. How would you feel?" And Alex Phillips, who will be here on Outspoken on Monday, called for peace after Rupert turned down her appearance to appear on Talk while deciding to enter enemy territory on the newsagents with Emily Maitlis.
Now, look, I think we had an interesting little chit-chat there about Rupert Lowe, and I just want to make it very clear, and Rupert, especially to you if you're listening, I think you're brilliant. I am not going to row back from that. I think you are so talented. I think you're politically passionate. I think you've got gumption. I think your conviction when it comes to policies and what you believe in and what you want to do for this country are entirely sincere. I know you, so I don't have any doubt as to the mettle of your character. The problem is, And this isn't to say that what happened was not gross, was not awful, that you know, have every reason to feel aggrieved, enraged, badly treated perhaps. And I don't know particularly what was going on in the weeks and months before this big ding-dong. But I would just say this, you know, we wanted you to come on this show so we can have a proper conversation. I wouldn't have, you know, hijacked you or done some sort of gotcha. We could have just spoken. But instead you went to do the news agents, which are a load of extreme leftists who only set out to pillory you, not really anything constructive, and really speaking to the wrong audience, because anybody who believes in reform policies aren't listening to that plasticine-faced moron and that war criminal that he sits next to. Oh, no, that's the other one. That's the rest is politics. Sorry, I forgot that. Anyway, the sort of BBC has-beens who have finally come out as Corbyn lovers. But anyway, just can we just take a moment to think about how stuff looks and how stuff impacts, right? Because that is what politics.
I agree with that last point, but I would argue, Alex, Nigel Farage and Zia Youssef should have thought hard about that before reporting their best performing MP endorsed by Elon Musk to the police. And as the brilliant Nick Dixon put it, it's amazing how many people's take on Rupert's situation is, I know they tried to destroy your reputation, which is everything as a public figure, and get you arrested, and that charges were only dropped yesterday, but just chill out about it all. Now, Reform, thanks to its own lawfare against their own best performing MP, risks a dramatic splintering of the right, as Rupert Lowe pointed out here on Outspoken yesterday that he ain't finished yet. Watch. Would you consider joining the Tories, or is that something that you're prepared to rule out?
I don't think the Tories are in a position at the moment to offer me what I need. So in answer to your question now, I think probably not. But a reformed Tory party, Dan, is probably the most powerful route to change the way in which we're governed. Obviously, so I don't think they're in that situation now. I think they've got too many MPs who are arguably Lib Dems rather than Tories. And if you look at their track record, they've had a number of plays with the toy set over the last 14 years, not least Boris with an 80-seat majority, and they have singularly failed to deliver anything other than more legal immigration and locking us all down for a prolonged period of time, which damaged the economy and damaged a lot of our young people. So I don't think they've got a particularly good track record, and I think they need to do a lot of changes, or make a lot of changes to their structure at head office, probably to the blend of their MPs, and start selecting people on merit and merit alone.
So what that means is that there is a new party of the right coming. Possibly this new Ben Habib-Veal, the Integrity Party, or maybe Rupert's going to do something totally new. But what's bad for Reform UK in this situation is it means Rupert has absolutely no intention of going quietly and absolutely no intention of reducing his direct and brutal criticism of Reform UK or any of its MPs, a situation that I warned them about for weeks, only to be branded an enemy. And there was an example of this on yesterday's show. They said multiple people made statements. So presumably that means more than you and you.
I was aware of two, made aware of two at the interview.
Who were they from?
One from Lee Anderson, who from the questioning was suggesting I was going around Parliament saying I was a good shot and I was going to shoot Zia Youssef, which is maybe why the police decided it was right to take my guns away. And from the questioning, I think I was accused by Zia Youssef of standing over him and threatening him. Now, we did have a robust conversation. The WhatsApp chain which followed wouldn't have supported and didn't support what he said. I don't know what other witness statements they got, but they must have got some supportive statements, because I think clearly there wasn't any evidence. And I can tell you, it didn't worry me, because I know I didn't do anything that justified the approach that was taken. And I think anybody with any common sense, Dan, could see that this was a bungled attempt at political assassination. Yes. And if you combine it with the vile accusation that I had early onset dementia, which I think you were quite clear was a message that was being spread. And you also commingle that with this accusation of bullying within the office, which is also piffle. You can see a sort of smear campaign which they hoped would gather momentum. But I have to tell you, the majority of people in Parliament, I think, thought it was laughable. And actually, they've all been extremely supportive and very kind. And that kindness and belief in me has been borne out in the result which came through yesterday at 11 o'clock when I was offshore Great Yarmouth looking at RWE's offshore wind farm. So look, I mean,
must have been a big relief. Can I just clarify though about the police though, because are you saying that Lee Anderson and Zia Youssef have lied to the police?
I haven't seen their statements, but from the questioning, I think they have made false statements, and in my opinion, they've wasted police time. Now, whether the police will do anything about that, I don't know. I personally think we do need to now raise this in Parliament, which I intend to do.
Now, what Farage has going for him to counter all of this, of course, is how clueless the political establishment is, as this exchange on Newsnight last night summed up.
It's really hard to know because I cannot get into the mind of the average Reform voter, I'm afraid. I don't know why they vote Reform, and and watching him just now, I actually agreed with a couple of things he said. Reform doesn't have any policies, it doesn't have a plan. And of course, Nigel Farage isn't fit to be Prime Minister. So, you know, sometimes we can agree with people that we've got nothing else in common with.
In the middle are the voters. And it is important, Jenny Jones, that you do know why people vote Reform, because they beat you 2-1.
Even so-called right-wing commentators like Fraser Nelson just don't get it.
For something as predictable and as predicted as the prisons crisis, we see chaos. Now, that is what is leading your average voter to think, hang on a minute, we knew the Tories weren't very good, but it seems that Labour could be even worse. And this is what is promoting, in my view, support for Nigel Farage. Not because people think Farage is fantastic or he'd do a better job, but they're kind of sick of being given the Hobson's choice between a failing Tory party and what now seems to be a failing Labour government.
Fraser, it is more than just mismanagement. It's more than just policy failure. We have been betrayed for 6 decades when it comes to mass immigration, and that deep-rooted betrayal by the Uni Party means there is just no going back. I promise you that. And Slippery Starmer's desperate bid to morph into Farage Light isn't fooling anyone. But first, the reason you're watching this show is that it's becoming increasingly difficult to trust mainstream media or the so-called fact-checkers, as we're always talking about, because they claim to determine which facts are true. The good reason we're losing trust. Think about the ongoing debates over free speech or Brexit or Trump or trans issues. But the good news is I've found a solution. It's called Ground News, and it's the best way to stay informed and cut through media bias and manipulative narratives so you can get the facts for yourself. It has been a game changer for a news junkie like me, and you can see for yourself at ground.news/outspoken. I'm going to tell you about an incredible discount opportunity today in just one moment, but first let me show you this incredible website and app in action. So let's use my favorite story of the year. The Supreme Court ruled that women can only be biological adult human females, reversing years of trans extremism. In one place, Ground News puts the 350 sources covering the story. Then they instantly show how the story is being covered by the media, broken down by whether it leans to the left or the right. This is called the bias distribution chart. If you scroll down, you can see every headline about the story, along with the political bias and ownership of the publication. So we can see for ourselves quite clearly that on the right, the Daily Wire covered the case very accurately with the headline, UK Supreme Court rules trans-identifying men are not women. Spiked Online was even more forthright, declaring women exist, get over it. And the Daily Telegraph looked in depth at the disgraced famous faces who declared trans women are women. David Tennant, I'm looking at you. By stark contrast, the left-wing National said the result was only a victory for gender-critical feminists. And the Canary ran with this hilarious headline, victory for the far right, as Supreme Court rolls back trans women's rights by 2 decades. So yep, JK Rowling, she's far right now. Yeah, right, I say. My favourite feature, though, the blind spot feed. This services upwards of 20 stories daily that receive the majority of coverage from one side of the political spectrum. So if you love the news like I do, the Blind Spot feed is the best way to get a balanced perspective on what's happening. Go to ground.news/outspoken or scan the QR code to subscribe today. Get 40% off the same Vantage plan I use for unlimited access. That's 40% off right now at ground.news/outspoken. But now, back to the show.
Prime Minister unusually chose to take only one broadcaster, GB News, with him for this trip, suggesting he hoped to land a hardline message on immigration.
I'm concerned that the last 4 years under the last government have risked us becoming an island of strangers. And that's why I'm clear that we shouldn't be an island of strangers.
To respond now, Connor Tomlinson is here. Connor, okay, where do we start on this one? Let's presume we agree with this new European death notice about the Conservative Party. Does that mean that Aaron Banks and Alex Phillips are right, Matt Goodwin are right, and it's just like, Rupert Lowe, you've got no chance, just move on, just forget what they did to you, reform is the only game in town? Or is there the prospect of a genuine small C Conservative Party led by Rupert Lowe on the right?
First of all, Dan, I don't know what's worse, a clip of Fraser Nelson, my intellectual arch nemesis, or the fact that the New European have suggested that they're taking their instructions from Tufton Street. Now, as someone who moonlights at Tufton Street filming a podcast called The Programme once a week, I can tell you the Taxpayers Alliance, Net Zero Watch and the New Culture Forum are not exactly delighted with what the Tories did for the last 14 years. So if they really were taking their lead from Tufton Street, very questionable. Anyway, as for reform,
I'm in their shit list every year, but by the way, the New European. So as I say, this is the first time I think I've ever agreed with them about something. But anyway, go on.
As Diane Abbott once said, a broken clock is right 3 times a day. So as for reform, yes, I know Alex, personally attempted to broker peace between two men, and she has the best of intentions. I know Aaron Banks, during his mayoralty run, was tweeting favourably, and as for the things that Rupert Lowe was saying, so he is a true believer, and it's a shame that he came in second. It's also a shame that actually Banksy didn't deface the size of his house and push up the property value. However, as for the rest of the people in reform, and I like Matt Goodwin, it feels a little bit like, when you have a fight with a slightly deranged and jealous lover, as we all have in our past, and they accuse you of cheating on them because they've had a dream or something, and they've overseen a text they've misinterpreted, and then you step by step disprove the allegations against you, and then they, in a fit of embarrassment but never wanting to admit it, go, well, why do you care so much? I don't know why you're still bringing it up. That's how it feels, because as Rupert has pointed out, I believe before in a different interview, if he would have been convicted on these bogus charges of coarse words exchanged with Zia Yusuf months before they were filed to the Metropolitan Police by the ostensibly anti-woke party who wants to get rid of speech crimes, if they would have persecuted him for this and successfully prosecuted him for this, Reform would have celebrated themselves as having done the right thing, and he would be sitting in prison for something completely fraudulent, just like Lucy Connolly is, right? And so the issue you have here is that one party was the provocateur, and that is Lee Anderson and Zia Yusuf, and unfortunately Nigel Farage, because he wrote in The Telegraph in March that Reform UK has acted properly regarding Rupert Lowe, which we now know not to be true. Whereas Rupert Lowe, and I dislike the term victim, but he is the person whose reputation has been rubbished by this, and if he were to go into prison as a 67-year-old man who is a high-profile critic of Islam, and we know that prisons are overrun by Islamist gangs, his very life would have been in danger. And certain figures in Reform were happy to have that. So look, I'm all for brokering peace, and I know that Rupert Lowe is an asset to whichever movement and party he goes to next. But the onus now is on Reform to apologise, retract, and make amends if they were ever interested to take Rupert Lowe back. Unfortunately, Nigel Farage has already made it clear that he thinks there's absolutely no prospect for that. And Rupert, and I can't say I blame him, says, well, I don't feel welcome. I'm not going to try and join a club that doesn't want me as a member.
Totally, but there are things, Connor, that I think could be done as a sort of halfway house. So, for example, Richard Tice, when he was interviewed this week on Times Radio, said, no, we will absolutely be running in the Great Yarmouth constituency at the next election, which would obviously split the vote, potentially allow Labour through. Now, there could have been an olive branch there, and he could have said, well, of course, we're going to look at what Rupert sets up, and maybe this would be a seat where we agree that Rupert is the best person. Now, I understand it's probably too early for Richard Tice to do that, but at this point, Reform have offered nothing to Rupert Lowe. They haven't thrown any type of bone. All they've done is tried to destroy him. There's been no apology. There's been no expression that we got this wrong. And I mean, Rupert has a right, I think, to feel pretty aggrieved, given we saw those pictures earlier. The police raided his home late on a Friday night, took all of his guns away. And apparently that is because, well, according to Rupert, Lee Anderson had told the police that Rupert was going around Parliament joking about shooting Zia Yusuf, which, Connor, let's be honest, even if that had been said, and Rupert denies it, but even if that had been said, right, it was clearly said in jest. And Reform UK are meant to be the party of free speech. They're meant to be the party that doesn't shot people to the cops for jokes.
Exactly, and so it's undermined their credibility needlessly. As I pointed out on a tweet that you read out earlier in the week on your show, Dan, none of this needed to happen. You could have resolved your disputes quietly with Rupert. Even something as small, and I don't endorse this, by the way, even something as small as suspending the whip over that interview with Andrew Pierce, where he made some mild criticisms of the personality-led nature over the policy-led nature of Reform. Even that was a repairable situation. The moment you call the cops on the guy, you not only put his reputation in danger, but again, his very life. So I don't see that being repaired, and I don't see it being repaired because, as you've suggested, if they were to have a non-aggression pact, that would be a strategic calculation. I think all of this is personal. I don't think any of this is being, none of these decisions are being made with cool heads, and I think that is on Reform's side, unfortunately, and I say this as someone who has tried to proactively encourage and shape them to live up to their potential. And I think that Reform are doing this and are unlikely to apologize, even though it's going to be the right thing, because they've made the electoral calculation that this won't hurt them. Now, never mind the fact that there was a 95-vote protest vote in Runcorn and Helsby when the margin of victory was only 6 votes that didn't need to exist. And it was because Catherine Blakelock ran as a spoil-the-ballot candidate, essentially, on behalf of their persecution of Rupert Lowe. They could have won by a comfortable 100 in that constituency if they wouldn't have made this rod for their own back. But Reform are still betting by the time of the next election, we'll be on 35%. We'll be not just a protest
exactly,
party,
but we have a
first
past the post system, as you rightly point out. So it's not necessarily just about the national vote. It's about what damage, say, an integrity party candidate could do if they were to stand against Reform UK in every seat. But do you think there's any chance, Connor, of Rupert being able to build a movement that actually delivers MPs to Parliament in bigger numbers than just, say, a handful?
Well, I wouldn't say never, because if we remember, Reform, while under the leadership of Richard Tice, were engaging with the online right and the likes of Lotus Eaters when they were polling on 5 to 9% for many, many years. And then within a year, they've now become the leading party of government. Yes, it's the Farage effect, but it is the fact that the two parties have completely collapsed, exhausted their credibility, and so now the public wants an alternative. So never say never in politics. I think Reform's main problem now is attracting talent, because as Sarah Poachin herself has said in one of her many disastrous interviews in the last week, that she has now replaced Rupert Lowe. Well, I think even Reform UK will have to admit that the caliber of talent of Sarah Poachin versus a Rupert Lowe is not excellent. When she cannot answer questions on policy, she has taken by far and away the wrong position on the assisted dying bill, and she's taken wrong positions throughout her career, so it shows she hasn't got good instincts. As far as Lowe's future ventures, I anticipate he's going to keep his powder dry for about a year or so, because the world is now his oyster. He's cleared the police investigation, he's conducting the rape gang inquiry, and he's been very frank about the fact that some of the Tories want him. Now, the future of the Conservative Party is one final thing, Dan, if I may. that is in flux that many people aren't paying attention to because they are the now third most popular party in the country by a significant gap between them, Labour and Reform. And nobody really likes Kemi Badenoch, especially because making a first-generation immigrant your leader at the time of immigration skepticism was a big bad boo-boo. However, there is a civil war ongoing in the Conservative Party that not many people know about, and I've been informed about this from people involved. CCHQ is getting a bit of a clear out, and they are putting, let's say, people on the generic wing of things in charge of their social media and potentially their head of candidate selection, which is the most important thing, because for ages you've had David Cameron and Munira Mirza and Dougie Smith in charge of choosing completely compliant woke wets on the basis of their diversity credentials. The types like James Cleverly, who got up today in Parliament and said, oh, have you thought about the implications of intersectionality for this? Literally a term about race Marxism. So if we get someone who is more amenable to your and my way of thinking in their Dan, more amenable to Jenric's way of thinking, and Jenric were to take over from Kemi, the Conservative Party might be in a very different place, because parties are all about the people in them. And if they're making the offer to Rupert that looks mightily attractive in 2 years, he might well go there instead. And even he's saying he's keeping all his options open. So I'm not one to trust the Tories, especially considering you've got the likes of Andy Street and Tom Tugendhat saying, well, we have to be moderate Conservatives and run back to the centre. But maybe Jenric might provide a soft landing pad for Rupert in the future. You never know.
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.